Ready? Everybody ready to do it? All right. It is 6:06. I'm gonna call this meeting to order. We do have quorum. Has every member had an opportunity to see the agenda for today's meeting? And if so, we'll entertain a motion for approval. Second. Motion has been made and seconded. Joseph made the motion. Josh made the second. If there is no other discussion on that, all in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Online, you can do thumbs up or say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Has every member had an opportunity to review the minutes of the August 7th meeting? And if so, we'll entertain a motion for approval on that. So moved. Motion has been made by Joseph, seconded by Abby. There's no other discussion. All in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We will jump into staff reports, starting with. Let's go jump to police. I don't see firearm. Can't hear you, Star.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
The weather is not very good out here, so I'll do my best. I'm Officer Stark. I work up Patrol North Community Policing Unit. I'll just go over a few things with you. School is now in full swing. We're just reminding everybody that buses and bus routes are going on in the morning and the afternoon during school routes. Just a friendly reminder to stop at the sign when it's out, both directions, not just following the bus, but also coming from the other direction when the lights are flashing and the stop signs are out. All vehicle traffic must stop. And then pay attention to your intersections and crosswalks because there will be children crossing every morning and afternoon. So it's a good time just to be very vigilant. We've had a few this year already where buses have hit pedestrians, not in Wichita area, but around surrounding areas. So we just want to be vigilant. Patrol North specifically has seen an increase in unoccupied residential burglaries. The bulk of these cases are coming from unlocked front and back doors. We do have a few people that are identified as possible suspects in a few of these, but we just need to remind everybody to lock all your windows and doors on the inside. When you leave, don't leave anything unlocked. Just making it easier for these suspects to get in. All they do is wait and watch you leave, and then they go in if it's unlocked. And then break down any of your new TV boxes, electronic boxes when you go to curb pickup, because these are just clues that you just bought something nice and I should come in and steal it. We've had a few drive-bys in the area that have been unreported until the next day, which gives us about a 9-hour delay and when we can start trying to solve these crimes. What we want to remind you guys is the See Something, Say Something initiative. Basically what's happening is these are drive-bys are occurring or check shots calls are occurring. And the last two that we had, no one called at all. After we did the neighborhood in the morning, everybody heard them, but they just didn't call. This is not just for check shots calls as well. This goes for any suspicious characters or vehicles in the neighborhood. We've got to get back into the See Something, Say Something initiative because people are just back to not calling. There for a while, we had a very good turnout in calling. Citizens were complaining about different suspicious characters, but we don't have that anymore. So we've got to get to our citizens and neighborhood presidents to get out that we need to get back to calling. On a drive-by, how it helps us if our check shots were just rounds were fired, it helps us triangulate it a little better and figure out exactly where we need to start looking. And with the new NIBIN, it allows us to get those casings in the NIBIN a lot quicker and start figuring out who's doing all these shootings. Also, we want to stay in contact with WPD and MABCD reference to overgrown yards, trash, and inoperable vehicles. I understand they're operating shorthanded too, but we need to take back the neighborhoods. And in order to do that, we have to keep the upkeep on them. Any nuisances can go through the city, they need to be reported. The officers, we just don't have time to go through and pick and choose all these houses that we used to and cite them and get them to MABCD. So we're gonna have to rely more than ever on citizens to be able to help and request those, and we can help push them through. And then the only big event that we have coming up will be ICT Open Streets. It's the large Parks and Rec event coming up on Sunday, September 17th. That'll be noon to 5 along Douglas. It's from Seneca to Bluff. There'll be vendors, food trucks. Douglas will be shut down. I think last year they had about 10,000 people out there. So it's a very good event. So we're just reminding everybody to come out and have a good time and be very vigilant when you're out there. So that's all I have. If you have any questions.
There's a question from Malia online that asks where to park for that event.
Give me that one more time. Sorry, I can't hear you.
There was a question of where to park for that event.
Around the Douglas event.
Yeah.
Well, anywhere on the outskirts. There'll be two major intersections. Broadway will still be able to get through. Washington will be still able to get through, and Hillside. So if you need to get through the town, that's where you're going to go through at. But as far as parking, you're going to park along any of the side streets, any of the parking lots down in Old Town. Just depends where you want to start, and if you're walking the whole thing or riding the whole thing. We'll have different hubs along the whole entire route, so there will be no bad place to be. If you're biking, obviously you can get there from anywhere. So just anywhere you can find parking along the side streets, because Douglas will be shut off completely.
Any other questions from Deb?
I had a quick one. Are there any thoughts on why folks aren't calling when hearing shots fired and revisiting this, see something, say something?
I think the consensus that I get when I do a neighborhood is they either assume somebody else is calling in the neighborhood, or unfortunately they believe that it happens all the time, so they don't need to call because it's just common nature. That's the attitude we got to get out of, so we can get back into taking the streets back over. If they call, we can get there and get it solved. But consensus is they either assume somebody else is going to call in the neighborhood and they don't want to be singled out, or they just used to it. At night they hear gunfire all the time and they call, which is not what we want. We want them calling on anything they hear.
And also fear of retaliation.
Yeah. So what we tell everybody on our neighborhoods is we're going to contact every neighbor in that street, regardless of whether they called or not. So we're not going to actively come out to you. If you have information and you want to tell us outside of that, you can always get us on the phone. We'll call you. We'll meet you at a different location. But if we don't call, we have a harder chance of solving it, and these kids just keep shooting. So we've got to be able to get out and get it solved. And I realize they fear retaliation, but they can be anonymous. We're going to contact everybody anyway. So you can come forth. With that being said, if you have a neighborhood or neighbor that you know that's having active parties or anything along those lines, don't be afraid to call us on those as well, so we can get a quicker knowledge that there's something going on in the neighborhood. If you let the parties go, those parties become bigger parties, and then those parties become parties where bad things happen, shootings happen. So we need to get that early. So if you see anything, say something, obviously.
Yes, I had a question. This is Abby Boatman. As far as the see something, say something goes, I had an incident in my neighborhood about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks, where I had noticed a suspicious vehicle in the neighborhood that was, they just seemed like it was just very suspicious. So I called my precinct and they told me that they didn't have anybody that could do anything about it. And they gave me a phone number to tell somebody else. And I called and they took a brief report, I guess. And then they told me I could call the precinct back and let them know. And then when I called the precinct back, the precinct kind of acted like they didn't know why I was still keeping them in the loop. So my question is, when you are encouraging people to say something, what is the most efficient way for them to say it?
Just so I'm clear, when you say call precinct, you're calling the individual substation of that region, not 911?
Correct.
So 911 goes to our dispatch. They're who can dispatch us the calls. If you call the substation, they're just gonna take the report, and some of them are just civilians, so they can't take all the reports anyways. So they're just gonna try to pass it on. They cannot dispatch officers. They have to call 911 anyways to dispatch officers or get on the radio. So the most efficient way is if you have a suspicious character is to call 911 and report it through 911. Yes, they're gonna ask you a whole lot of questions, but those are questions we need when we're responding. I'd like to tell you that we're gonna instantly come out there, but situations dictate that, and with us being this short-handed, there are some response time issues. But if you call it and report it, then there's record of it. If you call the station, there's no record you called unless that person that's sitting at the desk at that time takes record of it. And we can't guarantee that happens. But if you call 911, they have call logs. They'll put the call in regardless of how minor it is, even if it's just a phone call. And then I would request being contacted so that we can get further information if we need to.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions from Deb? Seeing none, thank you, Stark.
Thank you.
Move on to item number 3, Park and Rec.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. This is Angela Buckner, Lynette Woodard Recreation Director, reporting for Carr Brewer Edgemoor. Carr Brewer held its daddy-daughter dance on Saturday, August 26th. They had over 60 participants. It was the biggest number of attendees so far since the event was started. The theme was dance and beach and fun. Everybody loved the atmosphere. The annual event brought in $400 in revenue. Unfortunately, this is going to be their last daddy-daughter event until the renovations of Brewer are complete in the next year or so. He's looking at moving it to one of the community shelters, actually. Brewer held a 3-on-3 event on Saturday, August 12th in partnership with New chapter of Omega. This was their first 3-on-3 basketball tournament partnered up. There were 11 teams that signed up with over 250 people in attendance. During the event, there was food, free backpacks, and free haircuts offered. After the revenue split, Brewer accounted for $250 in revenue. Edgemoor, the Summer Discovery campers went on a field trip to WSU's Go Create, where they took a tour of the facility and were able to imprint a design on a drawstring bag. One of the Edgemoor campers, Isaiah, made quite an impression on one of the quilter volunteers and remembered her from the year before. He told her he wanted to learn how to make a quilt and work at her quilting shop when he grew up. Kim McCollum from WSU Go Create reached out to staff to let them know that the lady made a quilt for Isaiah. Janaea, who's the director of Edgemoor, contacted Isaiah's mom to let her know and shared the parents' phone number with Kim to get them connected. The unique field trip opportunity that the child attended gave him the opportunity to be introduced to something he may not normally have been able to do or see, which is why staff continue to seek out fun and exciting field trips for the summer camp program. On Saturday, August 19th, Edgemoor Recreation Center hosted a free circuit mobility demo session to introduce people to the newer class. Circuit mobility focuses on flexibility, breathe work, and mobility exercises. There were 10 people in attendance, and about half of them expressed interest in the class. Edgemoor's gym rentals continue to pick up through August. There was a total of 29 gym rentals every weekend on both Saturdays and Sundays, then Mondays through Thursdays. Various sports rentals include pickleball, basketball, and volleyball. There was a total of 51 hours and $1,262 in revenue. There are several long-time rentals that rent throughout the year. Lynette Woodard finished up the summer 10-week private lesson sessions with amazing participant numbers and revenue. Each lesson is 30 minutes and once a week for $16. The new vocal program that started out this summer had 22 sessions, which equated to $352 in revenue. Private piano lessons had 90 sessions, which equated to over $1,400 in revenue. Private boxing had 12 sessions, which equated to $192 in revenue. Private drums had 19 sessions, which equated for $304 in revenue. Private guitar had 14 sessions, which equated to $224 in revenue. All of our fall classes start tonight, so people still have time to register for classes and activities. On a side note, some of the big events I know Stark mentioned are Open Streets, which is this Sunday, September 17th from noon to 5. And then on Saturday, we have a ribbon cutting at Chester I. Lewis Reflection Square Park, which is 205 East Douglas. There's going to be a continental breakfast provided. There's going to be speakers, entertainment, and a food truck, and it's all free. And that's all I have.
Awesome. Any questions for Angela?
Angela, I'm sorry, I have a question. Angela, I really appreciate hearing all the great things that you all are doing. I'm curious, and this may have been a discussion that's already happening with Parks and Rec, but by chance, have there been any discussions about making the name of these events like Donuts with Dad or Daddy Daughter more inclusive to reflect the family units that are of today, particularly in Wichita? I know that there are a lot of homes that maybe feel like they would not apply to that particular setting, but maybe still want it to come.
No, yes, actually, Joseph, we're actually working on that. So you bring up a good point. We're in the process of that with our Jedi committee.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No
So
problem.
excited to hear that.
Any other questions for Angela?
Not mine.
Could you please clarify the date and time for the ribbon cutting?
Yes, it's Saturday, September the 16th, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. at 205 East Douglas at Chester I. Lewis Reflection Square Park.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Angela. We also have a written report submitted to Deb, if you want to look at that. We'll move on to item number 4. That would be Wichita Public Library.
Oh, sure. Is that where the mic's at?
So the mics are in the ceiling. We just have that there if you want to put your nose down and then project out.
Hey, good evening. Sarah McNeil, Wichita Public Library. I do service librarian for the Evergreen and Angelo branches. I've got some exciting updates for you. First and foremost, we have joined the Family Place Library Network. And what that entails is families and caregivers for children ages 6 and under are invited to explore this new experience at the Advanced Learning Library. They're going to pilot the program, but it's something that's going to echo to our branches later on. But essentially, we're going to have a dedicated space at the back of the children's area where families can come, they can network, they can play, the children can play with tools and toys that are akin to like Montessori, so not battery operated, to help them build connections and skills that they're going to need later in life. And then I believe it's on Thursday, they're going to do a news press conference at the Advanced Learning Library. And what this will turn into is classes for parents, caregivers to come and network with other parents. It's going to be alongside the children that are playing, but it's targeted toward the caregivers, making those connections and seeing the importance of play, because as we explore our world around us, even through play, we're able to build those early literacy components, and that helps us later in life when we go to school. So if you're interested, look for more information about that. I got to see it last Wednesday. They kind of have a demo set up at the very back where they have their baby mosh pit. And it's really cool. I mean, there's a kitchenette, there are different tubs that kids can pull out and build with. I know at Alfred, they also have kind of the same thing going on, but the first library is going to be the Advanced Learning Library, and they've gotten certified. The department there has already gone through the training, and so they are well versed in what this looks like, and they're going to pilot the program. So that's really exciting. The Wichita Public Library is also going to have our customers have the availability of picking their library card designs. But first, before we do that, we're asking the community to submit drawings or different visual art that can be displayed on these. And so we're opening different categories up for children 5 to 12, for teens 13 to 17, and adults 18 and older. So each one can design for their targeted group. But then in the winter time, these cards are going to be available for anyone signing up for library cards. So if you want to have something that your neighbor did, who's 5 years old, you can have that on your library card. That's something really exciting. And you can find out more information at wichitalibrary.org/card design. no spaces. One really important thing that we just kind of flew under the radar, but as of September 1st, we've eliminated our $3 interlibrary loan fee. And that's huge because we started charging that about 5 or 6 years ago, and it really did impact how many things that people wanted to borrow outside of Wichita. But we've been able to tweak our finances and eliminate that fee. So if it's something that Wichita doesn't own in one of our 7 branches and we aren't able to get, we're able to field that request nationwide and then not charge the customer. Now, the caveat is if you don't pick up that item, we're going to charge you an unplanned fee, just like we do with our own holds. But the $3 fee won't be a burden for customers. And it is, in some cases, a burden, and customers don't want to request items. So that's awesome. And so if you want to get on to our website and look up something and it says we don't own it, there's a little link below that says search WorldShare, which is a national catalog. And you can go in and you can request items. I just did it the other day with The Shining on Blu-ray because we don't have it, but I'm sure Derby or someone close by does. So that's a great service that we want to promote. And it's really great because we can't buy everything for everyone, but we have this relationship with other libraries that we can share, and we might as well make that free for our customers. One thing that I wanted to note was last month, artwork was installed at the Angelo branch. This painting we've had for a while, but we haven't had the capacity to install it, but it was recently installed, and it is a picture of Maya Angelou. And it's a mixed media collaboration between Wichita artists Paris Cunningham, Dominique Joyner, and Rachel Harris. And it was donated by the artist. And it's in the children's area, and it's beautiful. So if you get a chance, please come down and see it. I know that they want more art featuring Maya Angelou on in the building, in addition to the mural that's outside. But it's a great talking piece and just a really beautiful piece if you have a chance to see. So I do programming for Angelou, and one thing that we do starting in the fall, which this month is our family pajama story time. It's the only evening story time, and I stress that because I get people from all over town that come. It's not just people in the service area. We have really limited hours to Angelou, and I can't offer a morning story time because our branch doesn't open until 1. So this has been a way for me to offer that programming to families who may work during the day, or one parent may not be able to attend, the other parent or caregiver can come, and it's so cute. They dress up in their pajamas and they bring their stuffed animals, and I wear my robe, and my little osito has a robe, and it's just a lot of fun. So we do that on the 3rd Tuesday of the month. So that'll be on the 19th. And what I've been doing is coupling it with a make and take craft that falls on this Saturday. As I mentioned before the meeting started, some of our branches, we share the workload because of the closeness and proximity, and then also the space. So I offer a make and take craft that families can come in, they just drop in, you don't have to register. We put the supplies out in the children's area, and it usually ties back into the theme that we had for story time on Tuesday. And so we're doing squirrel sack puppets, and it's really cute. You take a brown puppet bag and make a squirrel out of it. So super low key. We do a lot of the hard stuff, but families can come and they can assemble, glue, trace their hand, whatever the craft is. And it's just a lot of fun. As I mentioned off camera, the library is recruiting 2 new community service librarians. It is huge because as much as I love to be over Angelou, I just can't. I do most of my work over at Evergreen. So we need someone on site who can be there fielding questions, making community connections, maybe even being here and doing depth. Just saying, and so we're recruiting those people right now. You can find the job postings on the city HR website. You can also find it on our website. You have to go through the employment tab, and then you can click on I believe it's the first tab below if you scroll down, but we're looking for someone. It's not required that you have an MLS degree. That's not a requirement. It's preferred. Let me just say that. But if you have any kind of community engagement experience, promoting literacy, I mean, you can tailor your resume to fit whatever is being posted. We just need someone that can be there full time, that can really make those connections, because we see there's a gap in service and we need help. So the library has created these 2 new positions, one at Angelou and one at Walters. And if you're interested in that information, what the schedule looks like, what the pay looks like, what the job duties and expectations are, I would say hop on the website and check that out. And then if you have any questions for me, I'd be willing to take those. Happy willing. Yes.
You know,
Yes, of course.
my real concern is that when we did some visiting around some of the neighborhood associations, 2 or 3 people mentioned to me the short hours at Andrew.
Yes.
And is there something we can do? I noticed that these openings seem to have been posted around August 18th or something.
Yes, so. I
So
have a-
how far along are we in actually making it happen?
Right, so usually with the salary positions, they keep the position open for a month because we're recruiting outside of Wichita, we're recruiting nationally, right? And so some of the library positions are in-house, you have to work within the city, you have to go, be vetted and all that stuff. This is gonna be something that we're gonna try and recruit across the
Everywhere.
nation, yeah. So once we get those people in those positions, then we can actually talk about adjusting those hours.
And
It's,
how far along are we in that recruiting thing?
so we posted the position, as you mentioned, at the end of August. I believe it closes on the 19th.
So then you'll start interviews.
So then we'll start interviews and I mean, it really just depends. That HR machine could be real slow sometimes, it can be real fast. It really just depends on what's
So
working.
we're looking at a long time before we're really gonna be able to have morning hours for grandmothers who want to take the kids in.
Yeah, and that's been a challenge at that branch for a long time. I know at points there have had morning hours and there's just been one person staffing the whole branch. And that's not necessarily what this person is going to be doing. Their position is not youth service programming. That still falls on me. They're going to be doing community outreach. They're going to be making partnerships with folks and more targeted toward adult programming.
Is there an avenue for people who are retired people who are interested in volunteering?
So there is always a volunteer opportunity.
To keep that library open longer hours
Yeah,
is what
that-
they're asking.
That the volunteers aren't gonna make a dent in changing the hours, and they're definitely going to expand the hours. They may not be in the morning. We've had, a few years ago, they set up a survey here, and they asked the community, what do the hours look like? What do you want? And there wasn't a consistent answer.
And then there are people who, by the time they get off from work and have dinner, it's closed at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so what they're doing, without giving too much away, because I don't know what I could say. They are talking about expanding it and having more evening hours for the community. And as I mentioned, I'm trying to build rapport with families and offer, programming as best I can. There are other organizations in this area that are targeting early literacy. And so we just today had a conversation of what does that look like and how do we partner with those people to not fight each other or work against each other, but support each other. So yeah, Storytime Village is a big one, and they're doing some groundbreaking, in the next year or two to have a big facility. So
there's still some concern that, I mean, it's great that the technical facility is doing what it's doing, but these branches really need that. And this branch needs it desperately.
oh, I know. I worked there for 3 years before I got my master's degree. I know exactly what you're talking about. And if I could wave my magic wand and say 10 o'clock, let's open it, I would do it. Unfortunately, I don't have those powers.
And it's gonna be a while before that.
Yeah, first things first, we have to get somebody full-time in these positions. Because right now, neither of those branches have anybody full-time. They're just part-time employees.
If you come up with ideas where educated, retired people can help, is there a way you can let us know, let folks know that, if something should happen, that
I would say if anyone's interested in volunteering, fill out a volunteer application on our website. And that gets sorted to whomever can facilitate that type of volunteer work. We have had adult volunteers come in and help us, not necessarily in a programming aspect, but other tasks that we do at the library, especially at the Angela branch.
I've got retired teachers who are wanting to play.
Yeah, and that's the best that I can tell you right now. If anyone's interested in volunteering, fill out a volunteer application. Yeah.
I just want to say, I'm super excited about your mobile unit that's gonna be rolling out really soon. I've already booked it for Spade Elementary,
Okay.
October 27th, I think, for our trunk or treat. So we'll have the unit out, and so I'm excited about that you can
Yeah.
roll and get your library card or wherever, get some books. So that's a good thing that's coming from the library.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we recently filled that position. That's a family coordinator position, and she's in charge of driving the bookmobile. So now we're just kind of waiting on transit to get our bookmobile. But we're definitely procured our collections and we're ready to roll, you know? Yeah, excited.
Quick question about the programming at the top for families and caregivers. Is that programming free?
Yes, yes. So all of library programs are free at Honor High. I've mentioned that or not, but yeah, we do not charge for programming. Sometimes we have partners that charge for supplies for their programs, but yeah, we don't charge for anything. They do have to sign up. It does require registration, and it's kind of like some of the programs they offer here where you don't just drop in one session. Like you're expected to go, you know, week after week after week for a certain period of time to receive that accreditation.
And so these are weekly programs then, like?
I believe so. I don't work on that team per se, so, but yeah, as far as my understanding is, yeah, every week they have a different theme where it's either singing or dancing or playing. And then they really tailor the needs of the community with those themes. Yeah.
Just for clarification, did you say the two branches that don't have the normal operating hours when comparing to others are Angelo and Walters?
So they have limited operating hours, yes. They're considered neighborhood branches versus regional district branches. So yeah, they have, and we're talking about expanding hours at both of those locations once we fill those two positions.
And I'm just curious, for those who aren't familiar with the historical context, why has that been the case for these two specific branches?
You know, I couldn't necessarily answer that specifically. However, I would imagine that there have been many branches and we've had to, you know, branches have either gotten closed or they've been consolidated. So, you know, if you're familiar with Evergreen, before it was Evergreen, there was Manissa and there was Twin Lakes. And so sometimes they just get co-opted into one hub. Before Angelo was where it was at, I think it was a little further down the street in a strip mall in the basement, you know, I mean, I can't speak to why, but we're the closest branch they have is Rockwell, and before Comiterra closed, it was kind of, it caught it, you know. I will tell you that the traffic at Angelo is low, you know, if we're comparing circulation numbers, we're comparing, that's not to say that the need's not there, but I mean, it is being so close to WSU, which has a library that students use, it's usually the neighborhood folks that are using it. So, I mean, that.
Well, the other thing is, these neighborhood folks can't get in it, it's not open for them, you know, so it's a self-eating watermelon.
Well, it's nice to have Atwater here that can offer computers for the public in the morning. And then from 1 to 6 or 1 to 8, depending on the day, they offer classes. We did an after hours computer lab, but I'll tell you, I mean, there wasn't a lot of foot traffic. So, you know, the library is constantly trying to pilot programs to support what the community wants. But if it's not a successful program, we have to pivot and do something else.
I really appreciate you being here and answering all these questions. I want to caution us though to also be mindful of what we define as like foot traffic and why that makes it.
Yeah, for sure.
And you mentioned data that the city collected and asking the neighborhood, and I think that's really important, always engaging stakeholders. Is there some way we can see that? I'd be curious of like, right, like it's one thing to say the data said this, it's another thing to aggregate that data and to really look at what story it's telling, like what was the average age demographic that we surveyed? What was the household income of the average person? Did they have transportation? So I would love to know if there is access to that data to maybe continue to help the city maybe understand what can be done better to increase that traffic. I'm for one am committed as a DAB member, just someone who knows the power of libraries to ensure that children and families have access to it. I also know Atwater is fairly pretty nice distance for some folks to get to, depending on where they live in this community. And so I have been in Evergreen and I see the investment that's been made there. And I'd be curious to see what the data was before the investment was made in comparison to now. And I would argue perhaps maybe we would see an increase because that investment of awareness and visibility was made.
For sure. And one thing I will say to that is, painting a mural on the front of the building has brought in a lot of visibility. It really has, because people before would just drive by 21st Street and not even see the library, just by
Absolutely.
virtue of it sitting down low. You can find a lot of information on our website under the policies and planning tab. It mentions the WSU branch study that we had, I believe it was in 2018, where we had a third party come out and do focus groups at the branch. So that was even more in depth than what I'm talking about here at Atwater. And that was really insightful because it goes through market segments. It talks about like everything that you're mentioning. So you can really do a deep dive in all of that data. And it's still published on the website.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, of
Thank you.
course.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Oh, yeah, please do. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach me at Sarah McNeil, or excuse me, S. McNeil at wichita.gov. That's my email address. And I'd be happy to answer those if I can, or if I can't, I can refer you to someone who can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the agenda has been moved around just a little bit because Philip is in high demand. So our next item is the MAPD overview. Philip is our presenter. Hand it over to you, sir.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Philip Goldenberg, and I'm the Metropolitan Area Planning Department. Recognize several faces. How many guys are new to DAB? It'll get used to us quite a bit. There's no planning items tonight, but next month you have 6. So DAB 6 at 6. If we're busy, that's a good thing. So we last year's budget cycle for got us money for 2023 actually gave us 2 new positions because we've been doing this with caseloads and have been doing this with people. So anyway, so there's no short of activity which talk from an economic development standpoint. Tonight here, what I'm going to do is give you an overview of not really of the department, but like what is zoning? Like why do we talk about it? What's your role? And kind of some of the background, not necessarily going to deep dive on like the legalities, things. We want to touch on a couple things like that just to give you some background. But you guys play a very interesting role, and a very particular role where not every community has an districts. We get that from outside consultants who are like, hey, not only do you have the planning commission, but you also have a district advisory board that you need to attend. Oh, well, what's that? Well, our city council districts all have advisory boards and they elect to hear planning items. And the recommendation from this board can have impact on how the city council handles something. You know, if the planning commission has one recommendation and you guys have another, city council talks about it. It doesn't just get put on a consent agenda. So you guys can have an impact on what's going on. And the idea is, you know, planning commission is an appointed body, half by the city, half by the county, because the first thing you'll need to know about our department is we're BI funded. We do city limits of Wichita and unincorporated Sedgwick County. And so a lot of what we have to do, we have to get the yes and amen from both. City cases just go to city council, county cases just go to the commissioners. But they're appointed body. You guys are local. So in District 1, we talk about District 1 things. You guys have an opinion and perspective about District 1. That planning commissioners don't necessarily do. We have one person appointed by Brandon Johnson on the planning commission. The 13 others are appointed by other members of the city or their elected officials from the county. So that's where you guys have a very unique role when it comes to land use conversations of should we allow this, should we not allow this, or if we do, what conditions should we put on it? So that's really kind of what your role is as an advisory board. And District 1 takes a particular stance on things and it truly is more heavily involved and asks a lot more questions. which I think is fantastic. So what is planning? What is zoning? So urban planning generally came out of, when you think of like the mass immigration in the United States, Lower East Side, New York City, tenement housing, industrial revolution. We needed to figure out, hey, people are living in poor ventilated, poor lit, can't even exit their building right next to the factory. People are getting sick. You don't want these land uses right next to each other. That's the very brief history. It goes on from there. But the way we do that is through zoning. Zoning has evolved over time. Generally, zoning is the separation of uses, but you could also look at it as how do we also include uses together? As zoning has evolved over time, it went from these uses can't touch each other to, well, maybe we can start incorporating some of these uses together. And how do we make those work? How are land uses compatible? Or what are things we can do to help make sure land uses are compatible, but also making sure that the incompatible uses are not next to each other. You know, we don't want heavy polluting factories next to, residential areas. Obviously, even in Wichita, there's historical remnants of where that has occurred. But those are long things to pull out of versus how do we stop that from happening in the future. So in order to do that, the national level down to the state level, Wichita has a comprehensive plan. And in Kansas, comprehensive plan are guidelines. One of the things you'll see in our staff reports is we look at how is this proposed land use or this proposed zone change in conformance with our comprehensive plan. And sometimes you say that it doesn't. But in Kansas, that doesn't mean it's a hard no. Our comprehensive plans are guidelines. They get updated every 10 years or so. And it's an idea of, this is generally where we want to see the community going. But you can even look at it. Sometimes our comprehensive plan identifies, well, this should be good for residential uses, and it's East Kellogg. And it's like, well, it's a commercial corridor. Maybe some commercial uses are probably okay there too. So you'll kind of get a flavor of that as time goes on. That there are times the comprehensive plan is either silent on it or maybe just better off as a guideline, but truly local information can, say whether or not something should be appropriate or not. So if comprehensive plan, we also have neighborhood plans, and neighborhood plans are actually very effective. Neighborhood plans are also sometimes where you see the lack of one. We recently had a case in District 1 that came through District 1 twice. That birthed the need for a comprehensive plan, and the city funded it. It is now in the works of getting a consultant on board so that we can have guidance in that particular neighborhood for how are we going to handle parking and other land uses and things like that. But we have other neighborhood plans like the Midtown, Historic Midtown Plan, the one in District 1, I believe. So that's 6. Either way, Historic Midtown, South Central is also very effective plans. We try not to leave them on the shelf. If there's an area of town that has a neighborhood plan, we will review that neighborhood plan with the zone change and provide that in the report to say, how does this conform to that plan as well? So we get down into zoning. There's multiple classifications of zoning. Wichita has been zoning since 1921. In 1996 is when they unified the zoning code of the county to make the planning departments a lot easier, the job a lot easier. So they didn't have to review 2 different ones depending on where you were. In zoning, we have land uses that range anywhere from residential, public and civic, commercial, industrial, manufacturing, and agriculture, which is just allowed in all zones. So if you have an empty lot next to you, somebody can grow corn. It's allowed. Within zoning, say you have single family. In our zoning code, it shows you what uses you can just do. You can have a single family home. You can have a school. You can have a daycare. There's also things you can do by conditional use, and that's going to be a term you're going to be hearing because that's one of the case types we often bring before boards is, well, a conditional use, we're not changing the zoning. This use is something to where we want to take a site-specific look at it. This is a use where it could be appropriate, it might not be appropriate. We want to take an opportunity to look at it because there might be conditions we want to put on it that make it more appropriate. One of the more frequent ones to get is what's called an accessory apartment. or an ADU. Mother-in-law suite, something above your garage, maybe you put a shed out back. We have conditions of approval. It should be in character with the construction of the regular house. It should kind of look like it. We don't want a very traditional looking house in a square, modern looking building in your backyard. And this could be another dwelling unit, things like that. That's just a very simple example. The most recent very high level case was we had property next to the Belmont Restaurant, zoned residentially. You can have a conditional use for ancillary parking, which means accessory parking to a nearby commercial use. And so that was very, very big example, very controversial example of technically in two-family zoning, you could have parking. Is this an appropriate location for parking? As of right now, that has been determined, no. The verdict's still out as to the final where that's going to land, but we'll move on. So you're going to hear about different things like zone changes, conditional uses. We have a unique zoning classification called a planned unit development, which allows us to customize zoning language for very unique situations where people want to be able to not, or in the case where you don't want a full-blown major commercial zoning in order to get one particular type of use out of it. So it actually is a way to help protect the community to make sure you're getting just what you need to make that work. All of our zoning classification have development standard in terms of minimum lot size and maximum height for buildings, how far away from the street do they have to be, those are called building setbacks. Things like that help provide cohesive and harmonious development is a way that we like to talk about that. How many off-street parking spaces are required, which the budget actually for this year, starting in January, we're getting a study done to determine are our minimum parking standards too much? We're going to actually have a consultant come in and look to determine is what the zoning code requiring now for parking, is that meeting our community needs? You know, that could be certain cases, maybe the parking needs to grow. Maybe in other cases, large retail developments where most of the shopping is moving online. Maybe we don't need to provide much parking. We're going to find out. The budget started to, funding is available in January. Of course, then you have to go through the RFP process and things like that. So I don't necessarily know what the time frame is, but we were able to get monies allocated so that we can go through that process. Yep. One particular note, zoning versus restrictive covenants. So if you live in a development that has like an HOA and you have covenants, that's not zoning. Covenants can have rules. The zoning code is separate. So technically we have situations where people come in and say, well, our covenants say that you can't do that. Technically, the city can still approve their use because the covenant is a private contract. So sometimes you'll get comments saying, well, if you approve this, that goes against our covenants. Was like, well, unfortunately, that's up to your HOA to enforce. So that's just a little distinction. The city is not involved in private covenants, HOAs and things like that. Some of the things going into kind of the legal side of things of why the basis for zoning and how we're able to do what we do, or the reason by which we can actually enact zoning regulations and zoning ordinances. In the broad general sense of things, there's been case law that has established the ability for cities to zone and restrict, basically using police power to say, no, you can't, you as a private person cannot do these things with your property in these zones, and you can do them in these zones. And the idea is zoning law has to be reasonable, and it cannot be arbitrary, capricious, unreasonable, or confiscatory. That's the word. The idea being you can regulate so much, it's as if you took somebody's property, you have regulated to the point that there is no value in it anymore, and they could argue, you have took my property, you have taken it, and there's no value for what I can do. So everything legal obviously is a little gray. So it's kind of a case by case. basis, and we obviously land on our own city legal team to provide us counsel on those things. Very rarely are we getting to that level of detail at like a district advisory board level. You know, we're usually never having that conversation of, well, those, you know, conditions you're putting on there are probably going to turn out to be a regulatory taking on somebody's property. The idea of reasonableness, what's interesting is that there's a lot of cases, or really most cases, where really you could argue both sides. There's reasonable reasons to say this is okay, but there's also reasonable reasons to say, oh, maybe this isn't really a good idea. That's what's actually really hard. And we've had conversations in this room and 5 other rooms in the city, all mostly on the first Monday of every month. Where you almost have like a split table sometimes. There's some people on DAB who think, well, I think this is really good. I don't think this is really that good idea for these reasons. And you have those dialogues. We have them at planning commission sometimes. We have split votes and one vote wins the day. It gets difficult sometimes because these are real people's lives. And then you also have the real people's lives who want to do the action or change their zoning. And how do you balance it? And so that's what's really hard is it doesn't have to be the best and highest possible use on the property. It's just reasonable and whether or not that's a good idea. So there's a whole lot of other legal things on there. I'm a nerd on planning law. It was one of my favorite classes in college. And we could spend like all of your evening tonight doing it. But one thing I'll really point out is something that's really awesome about the district advisory board hearings and the planning commission hearings is that working through land use changes, working through zoning requests is our constitution in action. What's really cool is, number one, we have to balance the private property rights of the person who owns the property. Do they have the ability to enjoy the property that they own in a way that they want to? Maybe. But you also have to balance the private property rights of the people who are around them. They've also bought property. If this person, LaWanda, wants to enjoy her property and, you know, have a paint booth and work on cars next to my house, is that a good idea? Paint fumes, ratchets, you know, until like 3 o'clock in the morning, like, maybe not a good idea. Are there negative impacts that can happen to surrounding property owners? So what we're talking about here is called due process. It's the 14th Amendment. We are giving the property owners around them the opportunity for due process without overly regulating, overly infringing on the right of the property owner who wants the zoning action done. So that's what's the balance of. One, you can't just come in and say, well, you get what you want, but you also can't just steamroll the people who live around them. That's what this country is founded on, which is fantastic, is we get to come before boards and people have the opportunity to change the use on their property and have a democratic process. And the people who are around them can know and rest assured that just because this person asked for it doesn't mean the city is just going to say yes, just because they did, or because they've got the most money, or they've got the right last name before them. Because we have a democratic process, right? Like I said, there's a planning commission, they get a recommendation. Well, you guys also get a recommendation. And then Mr. Johnson has the great job of sitting at the bench trying to figure out which one he wants to choose or choose his own. So it's actually a really interesting process to sit through. And you're gonna find out, we use the term quasi-judicial because a lot of times where this room almost kind of turns into a courtroom. You have professional staff. Here's what our documents say. Here's what our guiding principles and our comprehensive plan says as to whether or not this is a good idea, and therefore we have a staff recommendation. Well, then the applicant will get up, hey, I'm Joe Smith, I want to do this, and these are the reasons why. And then this room will be filled with 50 people, and each one of them will tell you, well, here's where I live, and here's why I think this is a good idea. And they have the one person who shows up once in a blue moon to say, hey, this zoning item is actually a good idea. I actually fully support it. They never come. If this room is full, get ready. So that's what's really cool about planning law is that it is the democratic process. That is what our Constitution intended. You know, everybody has rights. How do we not infringe upon each person's rights? And that's where it gets messy. One major conversation that was really brought up in District 1 that the council is continuing to have conversations on, and actually had a council workshop on, is what are the rights of renters? Right now, it's property owners. Property owners get notified. Does the renter? Only if their landlord wants to tell them. There's a sign that's put up in the yard. So yeah, that person can drive by, but what if the property is on the street behind them and they never take that street? Do they ever see the sign? We've had people show up in a room. I never knew this was happening. The only reason I know is I happened to talk to my neighbor and they told me there's a meeting tonight. Why didn't I get notified? Oh, do you own the property you live in? No, I've been renting the house for 30 years, but I don't own it. I didn't get a letter in the mail. So we're having a conversation at a city level. What are the rights of renters? Should they be notified by letter, just like their property owner? Because one thing we found, especially from District 1, absentee landlords, oh, they live in California, they've been living in Florida, they don't care. You know, I think I've had one time where a landlord showed up to a planning commission meeting and say, hey, I actually don't live there, but I own the house. And it could affect my tenants. And I want to know what's going on. And we're like, who cares? What? So anyway, that's a continuing conversation. It's never an easy conversation because a lot of different moving parts, and this is just really an aside of you have to think about as you grow your notification, you're growing the cost of doing business in order to get this done. If you grow the cost of doing something, you get into equity issues. Because, well, then does it become, well, if you can pay the money, you can get it done. Well, what about those who still want to do something, but they don't have capital to do it? Not fair. So never an easy answer, but it's still a conversation. And that's the big first step because when I started 6 years ago, it wasn't even a conversation. So. Okay.
Maybe the
Yes.
next conversation could be if we know we don't have landlords coming in, they don't care, maybe we should address what's going on with our landlord situation as well.
Also,
Yeah. That could be the next one.
but I can tell you, that's a whole other conversation. This team headed by District 1 and I'll follow closely by District 6. So. The things you're going to find the most, and in Kansas, this is what we talk about the most in our zoning cases, is there's 9 criteria by which we review the zoning change. We call them the findings of fact. We also call them the golden rules because it's based on a Kansas Supreme Court case called Golden versus the city of Overland Park. So it's really nice that the last name of the guy was named Golden, so we can have the nice golden rules. You're going to find those at the end of every staff report. You're actually only going to see 8. The 9th one is recommendation from professional staff. So then we list the other 8 and provide a statement or a finding for that. And then you're going to find some of those findings either don't necessarily apply what we put in there anyway. You know, how long has the property been vacant as currently zoned? Well, it hasn't been vacant for 7 years. So it's just more of a factual statement. Doesn't necessarily land. Quickly though, we talked about the zoning uses and character of the neighborhood. What's the surrounding environment? Is it compatible with what they're asking for? Is what they're asking for completely out of left field? That's what we kind of look into. Suitability for the subject property for the uses to which it has been restricted. What the heck does that mean? It's currently zoned single family. How can it be used in its current zone? Like on the Belmont case again, most of the property was zoned 2-family residential. It eventually became vacant lots. How could they be used now? Well, you could build single family on them. You could build a duplex on them. It's the wrong word right now. Nobody likes the duplexes. Basically looking at it, well, can it be used the way in which it's zoned? Do we even have to go through this process? Is there economic viability in how it's currently zoned? The next one, without reading it, flips the coin. If we reduce the restrictions, if we take some restrictions away with the zone change, will that have negative impacts on the surrounding properties? And what could those negative impacts be? And how could those negative impacts be mitigated, if at all? So we review that. I can talk about the length of the time the subject property has remained vacant as zoned. Sometimes we'll look at it to say, well, it's been zoned general office for 10 years. Sat empty for 8 of those. Now they're coming in for limited commercial and went to the restaurant. Maybe the way we do the shopping garden, provide another opportunity for different market to come into this environment. You know, a little bit higher intensity use, but maybe that's appropriate at this time. Relative gain to the public health, safety, welfare compared to the loss in value and hardship imposed on the applicant. So we're looking at, is there going to be a gain to welfare? Are there going to be negative impacts to the welfare of people? Versus, well, if we say no, how is that going to harm the applicant? Most of the time, it's just going to result in possible economic, disadvantage to them. They're not necessarily going to be able to make money. So again, balancing act. Conformance to adopted plans, where you covered that. Impact and proposed development on community facilities. That's like water, sewer, streets, things like that. There's certain cases where not in District 1 and District 5, the Northwest YMCA wants to put new ball fields on the south side of 21st Street near 135th. And right there, 21st Street is 2 lanes. If you're going to bring an extra couple hundred people, maybe 500 people every Saturday to soccer fields, 21st Street's 2 lanes. What's that going to do? Should we require them to make some road improvements to help, handle the capacity of people? Should it include a pedestrian line? So when people park across the street at the YMCA or vice versa, that they're not playing Frogger at 21st Street, where it's supposedly 40 miles an hour, and I can attest to myself that nobody drives 40 miles an hour, including myself. Cops and showed up tonight. So
I was like, yeah.
So things like that, community facilities, infrastructure. Opposition or support by neighborhood residents. Typically, we're not getting a lot of calls from people saying, this is the best idea in the world. I can't believe this didn't happen sooner. Most of the time, people have concerns. One thing to note, and this is on this one is in particular, because obviously most of the time why we're here is because we're here to listen to the public and have their opinions on things and their views. In Kansas state law, kind of case law, this finding alone cannot be the only thing city council can stand on. So even if you have 60 people in this room that say this is a terrible idea, and that's the only reason you can think of as to why the zone change should happen, you can't stand on public opposition alone. As I said before, a lot of times you can find other reasonable reasons why something's not a good idea. So usually we pair that with something else. Yes, there's 60 people who said no. Well, and there could be these negative impacts on surrounding properties. It's not really fitting the character of the neighborhood. So we try to couple it together with some other things. We cannot just stand from the bench and say, well, 5 people said they didn't like the idea, so we're just not going to go with it. That's really the one, truly one that's hard to not just get swayed with, wow, there's a lot of people saying no. Let's go to the other factors to see if there's other reasons why we can say this is not a good idea that go with the fact that people say they don't like it. And then finally, consideration by professional staff. Again, in your staff reports, you're going to have a staff recommendation. Staff recommendation does not have to win the day. We get overruled a lot, which is fine. We're here to provide guidance. We're here to provide resources on what does our comprehensive plan say? What's the interpretation of the zoning code? What's some of the legal backing for why we did what we did? What are precedences that have been set in Wichita? Even though it happened 20 years ago, does it have to happen today? That's what we will look at. So our department, like I said, just a little bit overview about us. We are slowly getting fully staffed. We actually just hired a new current plans person. Very excited, his name is Brad. He's at District 4 tonight. So we're finally kind of fully staffed there. Kind of takes the caseload off of everybody. You'll probably meet him eventually. Other than that, we also have an advanced plans division. They're the ones who work on neighborhood plans. They come in or updates to the comprehensive plan or a lot of the background work and research for the short-term rentals discussion that's going to city council tomorrow. So we brought lunch.
Already asked for.
And so that's where we work in tandem is they'll do a lot of the research for things, even if though it's amending the zoning code, which is what my portion of the division, my portion of the department actually like does the groundwork on, things like that. So again, we work with city limits of Wichita and unincorporated Sedgwick County. So if somebody called and said, hey, you know, what's the zoning in the city of Mays? Talk to the city of Mays. And I'm right about it. We are housed in the Ronald Reagan building, which is just south of City Hall. Our door is always open. Tasha has my contact information. I am more than happy to answer your guys' question outside of DAB, even if it's questions about how does DAB work from a zoning perspective, or hey, I've got a neighbor who's more wanted. I have talked with, and it's fine. You know, just we are here to resource you, just as we are here to field a random call from somebody from the public about questions they have about their property or their neighbor's property. So don't hesitate to call the planning department. We are here to help resource you, especially from a DAB perspective, when you do possibly need some more information about something coming up. By all means, let us know. We got a fantastic staff to be able to assist you in understanding what's going on. So I think I'm going to leave it at that with a lot of information in a short amount of time, but you're, for better or for worse, you're going to know the ropes very well next month. You'll have multiple reports to come through. Not all of them are crazy. For Tasha, her very first meeting was the first time. She still doesn't like that one, but so anyway, do you guys have any questions for me?
So I appreciate you bringing up the notification radius and renter and policy, because that was the first thing I thought of, and something that my neighborhood has been pretty active about. I did want to know, is there the opportunity to get public feedback on the comprehensive plans? I know when we've had our rezonings, we were shocked to find out that most of our neighborhood is rezoned for, or it's in the comprehensive plan can be rezoned for new employment, and so what is right now very residential is slowly becoming not as residential. And that really pissed some folks off. So
The short answer is yes. So it won't be long, and a comprehensive plan is going to be due for updates. I mean, it's projected out to 2035, which gives us a buffer space. But we try to provide some type of technical update every 5 years or so. With staff agency changes over something like that, we are a little bit overdue for some updates. The comprehensive planning process, whether it's a minor update or a major overhaul, always has a community engagement component. It is not a quick process. It probably takes, like if it's a major, like we are not necessarily starting from scratch, but we want to really take a look at all of this. You're looking at a 6-8 month period of time minimum where we hit the DABs, we do the circuit, we have, you know, community engagement things with probably at the Advanced Learning Library where people can come and put pins in a board and things like that. So short answer is absolutely.
and then just a question of clarification on my end. When discussing the case law, it's sort of the private property rights, owner of the property versus private property rights of the surrounding property owners. If I'm understanding that right, it sounds like that, at least from the legal standpoint, there's an absence of sort of a broader public consideration.
The due process is balancing the private property rights of those who own the property and want to do the zone changes, the property owners around there. But the surrounding public is where the public hearing comes in, because as you mentioned, we have our notification radius. Currently, our notification radius grows as the property grows. You know,
an acre is 200 feet, 1 to 6, 350, the next segment is 500, it's 750, all the way up to 1,000 feet, depending on how big your project is. There's conversations about even adjusting that and making it bigger overall. And so, but even though, say you live 205 feet outside and you didn't get a letter, but you heard about it from your neighbor, you can still come and provide comment. And so that's where, now, obviously, it's a finding that we try to analyze. That finding is not opposition from, you know, the neighborhood within the notification area. It's, there's no discrimination on who showed up or what part of the city they came from. We've had protest petitions submitted after the planning commission on cases from people who live across the city. But they just, in general, like the Belmont is a good example of that, where yes, it was in the College Hill neighborhood, but obviously people who are outside of College Hill care about what's going on in College Hill. And so they have a voice in it, and their voice helps people with the decision. Did that answer your question? Yeah, thanks.
You gotta find out about it.
Right, I know, I've been bragging about the notification radius for forever, just because most things are gonna be less than. So I live in McDonald, where Wesley did their rezoning last year, and it was, let me tell you, it was, not only were there so many rentals trying to get a hold of landlords in Kansas City, crosstown, even crosstown was a pain in the ass, but the protest petition radius was also very small, which was in some ways to our advantage, but yes, in other ways, you know, folks just had no idea what was going on, or what the consequences of that rezoning. So even with the higher costs doing business, and that was something I had a question mark next to, was where that equity comes into, because from my standpoint, as having been on the other side, on this side and that side, having more folks involved and having more folks getting letters seems to be more equitable. The cost would be on the city to notify folks, no? Well, there's part share costs in the city, but we require applicants to provide us a certified ownership list from the title company. Because they're deemed to have the most up-to-date property owner information. And so that list, depending on the number, I mean, you're talking, some people come in and like, I can't believe I just dropped $600 on this 350 foot radius. Like, you know, we have 1,000 foot radius for these, this costs $4,000, $5,000 to produce the list, because it's the cost of doing business with the title company. We bear some of the costs with mailing the actual letters, you know, physical printing, time it takes to stuff, postage, things like that. But really the brunt of the notification cost is borne on the applicant. That makes sense. I didn't know. Then to me, that sounds like, and you know, anybody who's a fan of title companies, it just sounds like then it'd be like send to current residents of X address. Right. Within a certain radius. That's part of the conversation with the idea of renters is, you know, there's no way to have the most up-to-date information about who's renting that property, nor do we get another name, but we're talking about, you know, how do we even reduce that cost? Could we send a postcard? You know, would it be a full letter to a certain degree and then a postcard beyond that, or something to that effect? There's been a lot of conversation about how to reduce the cost not only to the applicant, but also to the city for our postage.
Hey, Philip, on that note.
Yeah.
On that note, do you know any cities that would use like every door direct mail through the US Postal Service if they're trying to hit everyone for the lowest amount of costs?
I am not aware of what has been researched. I apologize. I know the conversation has its stops, but that's a good idea that I can bring to the table with folks at the planning department.
I would just think that's always the most cost effective, lowest, when the public's trying to do that versus like a pre-sorted targeted list or something like that. And I think they work off of a combination of like voter rolls, tax documentation, census data, et cetera, to compile that list through the Postal Service. So it should be one of the more accurate ones to also reflect renters as well. I guess to this point too, related to the cost, it made me think of your example of accessory apartments, like the idea that you're in a dense neighborhood and you just want to have an extra office space and then have to drop what you said, potentially even could be a few $1,000s, and you're just a single homeowner. Is that, because that's my concern also in this process is similar to discussions around STRs and fees is the the most citizens getting crowded out, and the only folks that could afford actually doing things being bigger businesses. Is that a part of the reason that y'all are looking at accessory apartments not needing conditional use approval through the current chain? Is that a part of that reason, or is that more for the places for people plan?
More for the places where people plan, and that's something that got kind of backburnered in terms of having zoning code updates to kind of help enact the places where people plan. So that was something I failed to mention in a high overview. One of the plans we have is places for people plan. It is a plan that provides guidance to the established central area, which is a 3-mile ring outside of downtown. So it's Rock to Ridge, 29th down to 31st. So generally the more older neighborhoods, and even if you just look at an aerial map, you'll see that the development of those neighborhoods is vastly different. You have more modified grid patterns. You get outside of there, you start getting cul-de-sacs, things like that. So very different type of development pattern. And the idea is within that area, you have so much existing investment in infrastructure, water lines, sewer lines, stormwater, streets, sidewalks, where they are. Waterways that we can focus attention and development where infrastructure already exists. So that we're not putting pressure to just keep going out and out and out and out and out. So one of the things as an example that Tex brought up is a discussion of allowing an accessory dwelling unit and kind of cutting some of the red tape. They don't have to go through a conditional use public hearing process. There could be the possibility of doing it by administrative permit, which still has notification, just like conversations we're having with short-term rentals, where it could be done administratively, but that doesn't mean there's not notification. Again, kind of cutting some of the red tape in an appropriate area of the city, but yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the city of Minneapolis did a similar thing a couple years back, and it's had a really positive impact for their housing market.
They got rid of single family zoning altogether.
Right, and they've had, their inflation has been down significantly compared to other metropolitan areas.
So yeah, in Minneapolis, there's no single family residential zone, which single family residential zoning, depending on your point of view, could be considered exclusionary. Some folks like that idea, or folks see it as more a negative aspect of exclusionary, and it depends on your question. But yeah, definitely broader topic of conversation and debate. Other questions?
No question, but just want to thank you. You've been amazing all these years. We beat you up pretty bad, and you still come back the next month smiling.
I'm a very childish. I learned how to get out of a few pits.
Yeah.
So,
But thank you.
you guys always keep us on our toes, like that one asks hard questions. That one doesn't let things just go. Not to say that others aren't involved, but the type of conversations that happen at Down One don't necessarily happen at other districts.
Speaking of questions, Philip, on that point, you brought up administrative approval versus going through the public hearing process and the example of the accessory apartments. Are there any, just trying to stay up to date, are there any exceptions or allowances? What are the allowances for administrative approval for conditional use or other forms of zoning or planned zoning? What are the exceptions, or are there any in Wichita right now where we're going to have to hear everything?
So right now, the zoning code does allow some level of administrative approval. The biggest thing that I can think of that we get requests for a lot are relaxation of a building setback by a certain degree. For example, you've got a side setback or a rear setback, how far you have to do it over your property line. Somebody wants to put a house addition onto their main house, or even, little shed, and they just got a certain type of yard where to meet the proper setbacks, they just really can't do it. Our zoning code allows us to administratively approve reductions in setbacks by 20% So an example, a side setback in most residential districts is 6 feet, 20% gets them down to 4.8 feet. And we generally approve that for that specific area of an addition, not necessarily the entire length of their property line. That's written in the conditions of approval in this matter. We can technically approve up to a 50% reduction, but that's for a very limited area where what they are doing is limited to a 300 square foot area. So that's easy math is a 30 by 10 foot area. So it's not like the entire thing can be reduced down to. Again, notification is not lost. Those come with a sign. I know we're not mailing letters, but a sign goes up. If people drive by, they call our number. Hey, what's this about? If there's truly valid reason for them to, and that's determined by the planning director, the zoning administrator, so don't ask me to weigh in on that one. Or somebody say, I don't think that's a good idea for these valid reasons, it gets kicked up to the public hearing process. We've had that happen. And there's sometimes where somebody submits something that technically, for example, this is in District 6, it's actually being heard tonight at District 6. Earlier this year at Central and Cougar, there was a property that got a conditional use for vehicle sales. And in a conditional use, you have a site plan, and it showed just in this small corner of their parking lot, they were gonna be allowed to display cars, and it was approved. And that site plan got approved, and they had to operate based on that site plan. Well, they came in and they wanted to update their site plan. They acquired more of the property, and they wanted to expand in the entire parking lot. And they started out with an administrative adjustment, as we call them, for an updated site plan. And we looked at it and say, oh, you went from 28 cars that you can display based on your area here to 78 to 80 display cars because you now own parking lots. Technically, we could have approved that by administrators, just a site plan change. They were already, the entire site was already approved for vehicle sales, but their site plan only showed one corner. And we chose, through the direction of our director and zoning administrator, that level of expansion was beyond what we felt comfortable doing administratively, to where we said, anybody who was involved in the original car sales public hearing process saw the site plan, thought it was only going to be a corner, for us to turn around and then allow it on the entire site administratively with only a sign being put up. We said, no, sorry, you gotta go to get us an ownership list. We're gonna notify your neighbors around you. And it's now a conditional use and it's going through the public hearing process. So there's always kind of checks and balances to that.
Any other questions from Deb? For all the new members, Philip normally comes out to our retreat and you get this at the retreat. So glad you came out here today.
Yeah, took a bit, but been busy. Yeah, yes, sir.
Can Manager 1107 North Pinecrest behind Williamsburg. Does the PUD, the restrictions or requirements of the PUD run with the land? The PUD is going to expire.
A PUD is the custom zoning classification, so it's a plan unit development. That is a zoning classification of its own and it runs with the land. So somebody's zone change to PUD.
The owner, even though the owner's changed a number of times, they would still be required to maintain the landscaping.
Yes, whatever was written in the PUD is required, whoever owns it.
Who enforces that?
The zoning enforcement arm of the planning department. Is it east side or west side of Wichita?
East.
East side, that would be Tina Henry. She's our, she works with zoning enforcement. I don't know what the official title is, but there's multiple ways you can call through the neighborhood inspection. Like if you go to like neighborhood nuisance and you file a complaint to them, they'll get it down to zoning enforcement.
Okay.
Otherwise, you can call our department 268-4421 and you can file a complaint with zoning.
All right, thank you.
Are you referring to the Williamsburg PUD?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we probably need to talk with Scott about that.
Okay.
Went to a Lambsdale neighborhood meeting, was that like February?
Yes.
And reported that Scott, Tina Henry's the commercial inspector. The last I knew, she was supposed to talk to them about that, to get that fence repaired on Lambsdale and on 10th Street.
Right.
but I've noticed that fence hasn't been repaired, so I'll follow up with Scott.
Not sure what that process is, but.
Well, it's also the landscaping, trees, shrubbery around the lake on the trees in the public right of way. Those are, there's hardly any.
Well, it depends on what was written in the PUD. If some of that landscaping was existing and it was not required landscaping, then we would landscaping for landscape ordinance. So it will just depend on what the language of the PUD and what was written into it as to what landscaping is required.
All right. Any other questions for Philip? Well, thank you, Philip. Always appreciate your presentation.
Yeah, no problem. Let us know if you have any questions.
Will do. We'll see you next month.
If you want to get a hold of me, you can talk to Tasha. She's got my contact information. I haven't, we haven't. Like, we haven't done assignments yet on who's doing what now. There's only 3, thankfully, we only have 3 meetings to do because they are all on the same night. It's 1, 5, and 4. Which all happen to be on the first Monday of every month. I just haven't gotten around to figure out who's doing what yet, but anyway, maybe we'll see you next month.
All right. So we'll move on to item 6, updates, issues, and report. From the DAB, start to my right with Michaela.
Updates. We are at the Office of Engagement at WSU getting ready to start celebrating Good Neighbor Week. We do that at the end of September. National Good Neighbor Day is September 28th. And it's an effort to elevate, celebrate, and encourage good neighboring practices. So we will do a Good Neighbor Walk, our 3rd annual on the Red Bud Trail, activate that space. We've got some asset-based community development discussions or takeovers, an outdoor movie, and then a project, Good Neighbors Care cleanup project to end it on the 30th.
Right, as a member of the Racial Profiling Advisory Board, I want to let everyone know that this coming Saturday, we will be having a driver's license suspension and revocation workshop. Things that you'll learn is how to file a hardship application. You currently don't have your driver's license. There are ways that you can pay your fines and be able to get a driver's license, so we'll go over that. We're going to talk about the city's walk-in docket, what you need and how that works. We'll have attorneys on hand. We'll help you look up your driver's license and see what the status actually is. So if you have any questions about your driver's license and your right to drive or ability to drive, I highly encourage you to attend our workshop this coming Saturday, September 16th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. and it'll be here at the Atwater Center.
Oh, I did forget one thing, if I can backtrack real fast. Some of the neighborhood association or neighborhood cleanups that are happening in District 1, they've connected with the Community Service Board on campus, and those students are going to be coming out to volunteer to help do neighborhood cleanups, and they're also going to be doing voter registration and hanging on doors while they're out. So we're really excited about that.
No updates?
No updates. Equity initiatives, we are still tutoring at our activity lounge. Is located 1608 East Waterman Street. It's for middle school and high school age youth. It is free. So if you are interested, you can fill out an application on our website, equityinitiativeks.com. But again, it's open to all middle school and high schoolers here in Wichita, free tutoring.
Pretty quiet in my neck of the woods. Just looking that folks in McDonald and Sleepy Hollow are still waiting for a meeting from both Evergy about their proposed poles on the Red Bud Trail. That was supposed to, I think we were expecting that around the end of this month to get news on that, as well as Wesley on just their general, whatever the hell they're doing around their neighborhood. They've got quite a few vacant properties, something on the corner of Vassar and Central that's getting torn down. Don't know what's going on with that. Want to know if they figured out their parking situation from earlier this year. just a few open-ended questions with them.
Wesley is. I think we're waiting to hear back from Wesley before we schedule that, but that should still happen. Joseph.
No updates. This is very minute, though. I do want to express gratitude to you, Councilman Johnson, at the city council meeting. I believe it was last week. There was someone who spoke in public forum, and I tend to get frustrated when folks speak to council members and they don't even get acknowledged, and you actually acknowledge the individual who spoke. And so I know that's a very small thing, but I think it's important for people to at least feel heard, or at least for the council to acknowledge that they've received what they have said. And I know council members do it from time to time. But I just appreciate that, and thank you for doing that, because I know that's really important and a big thing for some people to come forward and speak publicly. So to do it and to at least be acknowledged, I think makes the world of a difference and encourages them to come back. So thank you.
Just sports season, just recommend or encourage you to maybe go to your neighbors' sporting events, whatever that could be. It means a lot to them.
All right, nothing from Katie. Tex, what do you got?
We got the Wagon Master Chili Cook-Off, September 30th, high noon, NAFCA Park. Tasting kits are still, as they've always been, $5. That's all you can eat chili. I believe we have 30 chili teams competing in different categories, and 100% of the proceeds go to support the Wagon Masters Good Life grants, which specifically focus on smaller nonprofits locally who often get overlooked in most of the other grant making process. And so again, that's September 30th at high noon. But I think it'll be going on, I think, noon to 3 is the timing. If you want more information, you can go to wagonmasters.org, and there's a chili cook-off tab there and plenty of information, as well as we're running a 50-50 raffle with 100% proceeds on our end going to the Good Life grants. Other than that, would like to communicate Crown Heights. I see a lot of postings about this. Crown Heights oddly is having brownouts for like the last week, almost every day in different parts of the neighborhood. And so I've just seen a lot of chatter on that and just wanted to bring it up in case that's happening elsewhere. Obviously, we had power out neighborhood wide in Crown Heights today for a couple hours, but I imagine that's because of the storm. But it seems like every day there's someone posting where there's a few blocks out, and that's going on. I'm just communicating that. The other thing looking out for Crown Heights was I was pretty surprised to see that short-term rentals, as much as this has been a multi-year process, was going to a vote where Chase Billingham, who lives in Crown Heights, posted the agenda just a couple of days ago. And I didn't realize it was coming to a vote this quick, because it was the understanding and communication from city staff, because they met with Crown Heights after the shooting, and they met with us in 2022 before they started putting policy together. They had ideas. This was probably a very similar presentation to the one that the DAB got in 2022 as well. The communication and in the recording of that meeting, the staff said that they would come back once the policy is finalized to at least the DAB. And that was kind of how the residents thought it would end, would be before the council votes on it. So like similar how with the redistricting committee, we were briefed on it, the committee met, policy was put forward, came back to the DABs, the districts could communicate, and the DAB members can communicate their positions. There seemed to be a bit of understanding that that would be the process with the STRs. So I'm a bit frustrated because I have multiple emails to city staff throughout 2023 asking when it would come back to the DAB one, in large part because I had made that commitment and communicated that to the Crown Heights neighborhood, that whenever it did, this would be a great opportunity. As much as they can speak tomorrow, this is a great opportunity, particularly in an evening time frame, for Crown Heights residents to have to communicate their position on this. And hey, most of them may be fine with the current update now, but it's just for transparency and due process. I feel like I had to bring that up because I feel like I was frustrated to see that it was happening. And I know folks are like, we worked on this for years. But in large part, though, there was that commitment to particularly Crown Heights and And I thought it was reasonable to ask for city staff to come back to District 1 specifically, so we could then get that feedback even beyond Crown Heights for the final policy before the vote happened. So I figure for the record, I would want to communicate that.
Thank you, sir. That was my communication out as well, so that will likely come up tomorrow. Did I hear you say for the October dab, you're bringing chili for all of us?
Hey, if we have some left over, but our tent is usually we serve the most at the Wagon Master tent. You'll get the biggest portion there for a reason. So we may not have as much left over as the others.
All right, thanks, Tex. All right.
Oh, he was still talking about you.
Moving to the public agenda, there are no scheduled items. So we'll move on to number 8 off agenda items. Is there anyone here from the public that has something they would like to talk to us about that is not on the agenda?
In the tradition of DAB 1 people not wanting to give anything up easily, I wanted to talk about polls again. And I'm kind of circling back. It's interesting to, hear that talk about appropriateness, in the neighborhood. That's exactly where we are on this. And we submitted some.
Do you mind stating your name, please?
Kim Curry. And back in June, we submitted some questions, and we really submitted them to you or to whoever represents us in the city. And you came back with a letter from Evergy, which was basically the same information that they always say. But these were really questions that were more maybe appropriately answered by the city. So, yeah, so I thought maybe I could just distribute these again. And if you tell me, yeah, we just don't care about these questions and these aren't appropriate and it doesn't matter because Evergy can do whatever they want to do. But our fear is that, we saw what happened on the other side of Hillside after it was done and everyone said, oh my God, how did you let this happen? And then Evergy, boy, didn't they pay $1 million in a apology project? Am I remembering that?
1.25.
So how about we just, avoid all of the shame and shock and apology money and just get them to go underground with this in the first place. I just don't understand why the city doesn't back us on this. Why you just say, yeah, sure, take all those trees down and just deface the whole neighborhood from 9th to the university. And why doesn't WSU care? Why don't the engineers there say, gosh, we don't want to be the school that, I went out to Greenwich and Kellogg the other day and looked at those poles again. And I just can't believe you're going to put those in our neighborhood. It's just inappropriate. And they're going to be there for 100 years or something,
I have a question in relation to that.
Are you finished?
I'm finished. Yeah, I would love to have somebody either tell me, we don't care, we're not going to answer these, where are these poles in other neighborhoods? Are they just putting these poles in neighborhoods of color? Because that's the only neighborhoods I see them in. I know I go over to College Hill and all that development and not a pole. I can't find a pole. So I just want to make sure it isn't like freeway off ramps that we're just going to pick certain neighborhoods where we put these poles. And then 30 years later, we're going to say, oh my God, can you believe we let them do that? And we know that they have the money. They just are trying to increase after this whole rate discussion. They clearly just want to put more money back in the pockets of their investors. That's their job, but we're looking to our city leaders to say, no, you can't do that to our residents.
One of the things I had noticed recently they're coming up and down the streets in my neighborhood, replacing a gas line. Now, if you've got the sewer down there, you've got the gas down there, you've got the water down there, and you're digging it up right now, you know, just the big picture, I'm wondering is there any way, how do we address going for the big picture that consolidates everything? And do we want to be the next Maui? You know, really? And we've already got the underground infrastructure. We have to maintain it. We are maintaining it. How if we simply, as we maintain it, we go ahead and do. Now, certainly this is a new implementation that, you know, for me, it would never happen if I were, but I'm not. But is there a direction that we could take as a community or as a group? What could we do? Is there a way to find out what would be the best way to fight this kind of invasion when we should be getting better, not worse?
So I will try to answer all of that. Evergy can better answer the underground issue, but my understanding of underground when we talked was the conduits for a transmission line being at 169,000 kV would be almost the entire size of a road, not the lines that are in there now, which would mean they would have to tear out the entire road for the duration of the transmission line. So for phase one, that's 2.8 miles that they would have to tear out road, put in conduits the size of maybe the hallway up to 6 to 8 foot tall, bury that below the ground so that they could have something with that much high power below the ground. That was what they explained at the public meeting, which I have a new date because they couldn't find a place, October 17th. Those flyers will go out, but that will be a place where you can ask them about what the actual facility size of underground will look like. So the questions on the letter, so I'll take these one by one and then answer the rest of your question. Were there any studies done to evaluate the impact on the neighborhood now and in the future decades? I do not believe so. What is the overall loss of property value? We do not know. Everyone believes that they are losing property value. Do you have research to show how much longer it will take people to sell their property when they are next to these massive poles? Yes and no. So yes, properties have sold along the Mossman route now since the poles went in. And Habitat continues to build over there, so properties are being purchased. Long-term, couldn't tell you. I know that the residents there didn't feel like it was good to be able to sell their property with those poles there. How and when would you determine how the poles have affected property values and adjust property tax accordingly? Don't have an answer to that. That's probably county appraiser. We could reach out to them to see, but again, properties are being appraised by them. I don't know if they take that into account or not. Representative Finney did ask that question and talked to the state legislature about that while we were dealing with phase one. What is the estimated 75-year loss to the city in property tax if the properties have low values? I don't think that can be determined until you know what that actual loss is and take that times 75. And what other neighborhoods other than Mossman have these poles been in this size? There are no neighborhoods that have the multiple poles that we see in phase one. There are neighborhoods. One is out by, it's not Northwest. There's a middle school on the west side that has one pole on the corner. The difference is those lots are a lot larger, so it doesn't have the same impact. I mentioned at one of our last meetings that they are looking at Rockwood and putting that in. Rockwood, those house values are a little bit higher than at least phase one. We've talked about alternate routes. So instead of running at where the current transmission line is, which is what Evergy likes to do, is stay along the current path, which means any neighborhood that has a transmission line, not a distribution line, could be impacted. There is one that runs through Rockwood. And our conversation, I asked if we could run that down Rock Road in Douglas instead of through the neighborhood where it's at now. Evergy also has a policy of if they have a co-located line on there, so a cable line or something else like that, those poles will stay, even if the route is changed, because it's not their responsibility, as they say on the co-location line. So for this current phase that's proposed down Redbud, there's only 2 poles on this phase that have a line. Both of those are distribution down to a street light. So they can remove every pole that's there currently. And as they put those new ones on there. How have those neighborhoods been impacted? I personally don't know. You can drive by those neighborhoods and see, again, with the larger lot sizes, it doesn't look as bad as it does, as you see on the phase 1 route. I'm sure they have a map of where their stuff is at. It's hard to explain what transmission lines look like because they have all different types, but if you see those taller poles or bigger poles with 3 lines on it, those are normally your transition poles. You can follow those routes all throughout Wichita. There's one they haven't talked to me about over by McAdams Park that goes down Ohio. So that's in the neighborhood as well, but I don't know when that one's getting upgraded. But you can find those. Evergy that I know of only goes underground with a distribution type line. So our water treatment plant, there's I think it's 12 or 15,000 kilovolt line that's buried because it can go into something small and it's stored under the road out there. Have you brought in any third-party city utility planners to explore options for this power upgrade? Just our public works team. You will see diagrams and renderings at the October 17th meeting. That's a 30% meeting. So you'll get a 30% meeting and a 90% meeting. They at one point had some markings out on the trail just as they were showing me in public works what that would look like. With the change to the green route, what happens to the poles that are already in place on the red route? So again, all those poles will come out if they don't have utility on them. Right now, there's only 2.
You mean the poles,
The
the
current
Mossman
transmission
pole,
line.
the first set of poles?
No,
We're
the
talking
first one
about-
is staying as it is. There is still a request that 11th Street and Hydraulic become steel anchored with wood poles in between. That request has not been met yet.
Well, it almost seems like now we're getting 2 routes instead of 1.
There are 2 routes. So phase 1 was a route going down to St. Francis. Phase 2 is going towards Innovation Campus.
I guess I thought that by going down Redbud, that would mean they could take all those poles out over on,
They will take every pole
Yeah,
out that
so
goes down
Hillside.
Volusia. So Hillside is a distribution line. The transmission line is Volusia. Volusia down to 16th, 16th down to Fairmount, and then over to WSU. That's the transmission route. And that's one of the things as we first started engaging with them, learning the difference between the distribution, which are the lower poles, and these transmission lines.
so when WSU got together with Evergy to put that substation on their campus, that's kind of when our fate was sealed, right? I mean, if that substation had gone somewhere else instead of, I mean, my understanding is they put it on campus so the engineering department could loop in and study it. So that's really kind of where our fate was sealed, was when that deal was done a decade ago or whatever.
I can't speak to that. I can say they have to upgrade all of their transmission lines. So it wouldn't matter where the substation's at, all of the transmission lines will be
But
upgraded.
they wouldn't necessarily need to go down the middle of the neighborhood.
The problem is that it's cheaper for them to go where the line is already at. So again, if you're in a neighborhood where there's a transmission line today, low income neighborhood or wealthy neighborhood, they're gonna want to go down that path that they're already on.
So there are transmission lines on the Redbud Trail?
No, I was getting to that after I get through the rest of these. There will be poles on the Redbud route, not the current route, which is all wood poles again down Volusia. How did you go so far on the Redbud route and quit? Looks like there are poles going west from 17th. Does that mean the full red route will stay put? the route actually stops before Oliver. In between Paradise Church and the back of the houses will be the final poles that come over from the Red Bud and connect to the already the line that's already there now, 17th Street. The wood poles, and I believe there are 5 of them between that route and the substation, will be taken out, and those will be steel poles. Has WSU played any part in the planning of this energy upgrade? Not to my knowledge. As the Innovation Campus, the Center of Technological Advancement, have they been pulled into the upgrade design? Again, not to my knowledge. That's more of a question for Evergy, but they have their own engineering team, so I would assume it's probably no. What does the Shocker Neighborhood Coalition and other departments related to larger WSU community think of the plan? Again, I'm not sure on that. And I have not had conversations with mayoral candidates on this. I'm not sure if they weighed in anywhere else on what they think. The community vote served no purpose, completely unreliable polling, where basically everyone on one side of Hillside pointed to the other and vice versa. Using the survey results to convince us this is what we asked for is disingenuous and only serves to instigate resentment. Nobody wants these polls in their neighborhood. So I sent this to Evergy because you have more technical questions that I could not answer, nor Public Works, and I wanted Evergy to weigh in on it. And that's where that funds came from. As far as Red Bud, again, when the situation in phase 1 happened, me and Representative Finney continued to talk about removing those poles completely. At the time, we saw that per state statute, the utility company does have pretty much the final say outside of the KCC. And we made the request, demand that neighborhoods not be impacted in their front yards, like we saw in phase 1. Phase 2 was going to do that same thing, going down Volusia. We didn't want to see those steel towers going down Volusia, down 16th Street in the public park and over to WSU. So I'd probably say 3rd or 4th meeting, we asked about Red Bud Trail. And I know that's not anything attractive, but for us, it wasn't the front yards of these neighborhoods. It was the backyards of the trail. We know you can see it. Those are the only poles you can see from the highway. But it was essentially the lesser of two evils for us. And we knew that Evergy didn't have to do it. I mean, they don't have to do this. They could go back down those front yards and put those steel towers in more people's front yards. But
So they can put the towers wherever they want to put them.
they can't. The KCC could say no, but the KCC also knows these energy upgrades have to happen.
Well, didn't the KCC tell us they don't have any
Well,
say about this?
yeah, they, on the telephone, of course, they shoved it back on the city.
So the KCC could?
So, I mean, they can shove it on the city. I mean, I've been pretty open about this, and taking even Representative Finney out of it because she's not here. I've been supportive of Red Bud because it's not front yards. And when it came down to it, the historical precedence of the power poles going east of Woodlawn, I used that to say there's no reason you can't do that on the Red Bud. I don't want front yards impacted. At that same time, I talked to Public Works and Utilities to see, are there any restrictions we have as a city that would stop them from using the trail versus going down the neighborhood? We didn't find any. They have some general concerns about the railroad potentially coming back through there and wanted us to pay for removal if that ever happened. But also that was not their agreement east of Woodlawn, and that's what I used to push back and said, you didn't make that there, so don't do it here. At the end of the day, I just continued to fight against the front yards. We all talked about burying the lines at first. That's when I learned about the conduits, or at least their research of the conduits of it. I looked around the country under some other elected officials and reached out to them, and they kind of confirmed that conduit thing is real, like it would be pretty big. I asked if we could work together, Public Works and Evergy, if we're resurfacing a road, maybe we spend a little more money and just dig it all out and let them
When
build
you
it.
say road, are you talking about the Red Bud Trail?
No, I'm talking about a street.
Any street?
So right
But
now,
why, but what is the big, why couldn't they go underground on the trail since it's been a railroad forever and there's nothing underneath there.
So then you get into the federal power of the railroad. So the railroad then would have to say yes to that.
So they still own that property.
Railroads control anywhere the railroad is at unless they sell that property per Congress. So Congress gave them that authority. So we always have to talk to the railroad, even before that became a walking trail. We had to get permission from the railroad to build the walking paths out there for that.
Oh, I thought it had reverted, when we were
No, they
notified
could
that.
come
we
back
had
tomorrow and
rails to
say they want to
trails.
use it and they could build railroad back there and there's nothing we could do about it. So we never talked about burying it. Well, actually we did, not at first. At first, I was trying to line it up with road projects because Volusia's a concrete street, needs to be some repairs anyway. So if we could work together, put the conduit there, but then they started to talk about, so we would inconvenience people and tear up their entire road and access to get home. To put this line in, and that may take months. So then how are folks gonna get home? I mean, we went through the whole thing and the cost. Also, we didn't have the money in the CIP because once we start doing that for District 1 and you rebuild 2.8 miles, that might be $5 million of road to do that. And then we have another one coming up and they're doing transmission lines all over the city. So we went through a pretty exhaustive list of that. It's something I'll never discourage the public from pushing back with them on, but it continued to come back to, we're gonna go down this current path. And us saying, no, we wanna see we'd rather have the trail than that. Both of those options are terrible, but that was again, the lesser of two evils. So when they say the city, they mean me. We were talking through that. We walked the trail. We walked other routes. We walked Hillside. Hillside was also pretty bad because they'd have to purchase, I think, 20 feet of graveyard. Some of those graves come up to that, so you'd have to relocate graves. It was a lot there. So, and there's even lines that I'm kind of uncomfortable with now where you have wooden poles, especially around 17th and Hillside in the middle of the sidewalks. Somebody with disabilities or in a wheelchair, how do they get around that? And that was kind of the conversation. The easiest way for them to do it, bigger steel poles, you would still probably have those in the middle of the sidewalk unless you went deeper into the graveyard to have a nice walking path. So we went down 5 different routes. Nothing was really good. That was, again, the one of the lesser of the evils. And when their meeting comes up, that's why I've never told anybody different. Like that really was a push to make sure we didn't impact front yards. It's one that, I wish wasn't impacting any neighborhood in the way it is, but that was just the choices that we had at the time. And I knew and still know per state law, they don't necessarily have to do this. But if they don't, they're going down that other path.
So when Riverside fought the poles, where did they go? What happened?
That work just hasn't started yet. So they're still, that I know of, talking about the same route. The only difference would be is if they come up with a route that doesn't impact the neighborhood as much. And this really becomes the state challenge is, again, it's easier and cheaper for them to go down their current routes, but when some of these neighborhoods were developed, there were no other houses, so it kind of made sense to have these large power lines there. But now, you impact the neighborhood with having those transmission lines running straight through it. And the infrastructure continues to be bigger and stronger, like these steel towers.
So they just put that area on hold.
Just like this was supposed to happen, I think 2 years ago.
I really appreciate you going through this list of questions with me. Thank you.
If you have any more, I'll answer what I can, but that's really what it came down to. So I get all your pictures, it's just that was it. Now, if they come up with a way to bury it tomorrow and put down the red bud, I'm 1000% there. Haven't been able to see it in a way that works out how we all hope. But I'll be at the meeting too.
Thank you. I know you've been to the last few DAB meetings, even some of the later ones, we haven't had a chance to speak, so thanks for coming. There's been, I think, an ongoing question that I've looked at a few times for the October 17th meeting. Are those flyers only going to go to the immediately adjacent properties, or are we going to have an extended radius for that?
I believe just the properties on either side of the trail.
Nothing we can do about that. That's just,
We can ask, I mean, I asked. Yeah. But I said, you know, that's a preference, but
Do you think that meeting is set in stone?
no. I say that
So if we wanted to
because
do our own mailing, for example, we wouldn't want to do it.
I can
till
let you
we-
know when it's set.
Okay,
I feel bad that I've been saying it just to keep to be transparent, but
Right.
the September 26th meeting, they didn't confirm the location because it had got double booked, and then they've had 4 different dates before I've said this one today. Right now, Public Works thinks this is the day. I think it will be the day, because I think that space is available. But it's not confirmed on my calendar yet. It's just a hold. Once it's confirmed, I'll let people know.
because we may want to do our own mailing, because we, have a list of everybody who lives.
No,
I
you
mean,
should.
it's not hard, it's not hard to get that list. It's
Yeah, no, I think. the
very
more people, the
easy
better.
thing to access addresses, I mean, resident and. So,
Will that be at Hughes Metropolitan? Well, no, Sarah.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
well, I won't say until I know for sure, but I think so.
and I think there's still some open-ended questions of why the Mossman substation, and like you said, there isn't a transmission line going up there currently, because I know there's a big ass one on Hillside and 29. There's one a little further down 17. And so it's kind of kicking around in my brain. It's like, it's cheaper to go where there's already lines. I know there's some giant lines going behind Brooks back there. And so why this substation in particular, when for Evergy, it's cheaper to go where there's already lines than something brand spanking new.
Yeah, so I will tell you, the Redbud Trail Route is costing them almost $1 million extra to build. But again, if they want to save the million, they go back through the front yards.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of the everything that happened in the impact and the media impact on them, all of that. Continuing to talk through trying to keep it out of front yards. But the other lines though, seriously, everything I've read, and I even looked at some federal stuff, all of these transmission lines are gonna get upgraded. And the question is, can we all have a working relationship enough to reroute and then pull out the current poles? Because personally, I don't care about the distribution line and like cable and stuff on there. I think they should move that anyway, but if you're gonna put all these new poles on different routes, I think the old ones all should come out. That's just my thought on it, but that's gonna be the bigger conversation to have.
worth remembering that when cable first came to Wichita, they didn't bother to ask Southwestern Bell or AG at the time if they could attach the poles and started running. So about a month into it, we reached an agreement with something.
That might be the agreement that's keeping some of these poles in now.
Probably.
that was one of my neighbors, that was a question, was whether they would use these poles for anything else, like would they be these utility poles, would it be for more than just electric power? Would they be selling other services to?
That's a better question for the 17th. My understanding from memory is that no, because the more you put on the tower, the higher it has to go. And once they set the height, anything else would have to be super low to the ground, and they don't like doing that. But the problem though, especially with the wood poles, if you go down Hydraulic right now, in the daylight, you'll see some poles that are cut off and they have like a black tape or paint around the top. Those were the poles that were there before, and they just cut them down. Doesn't look attractive at all.
You know, and it's not even really the poles, it's those things that stick out of the poles.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think poles we're visually, we're just used to that. But what's so horrible about those is those big arms that come out of them, you know, with just insane.
Yeah.
Let's just hope that in the coming decades, they figure out a better way, because if our cities just start getting crisscrossed with that stuff.
Yeah.
That is some nasty looking stuff.
For your final thing, I absolutely do care. I just continue to have bad news to deliver on. So there's nothing anyone brings to me I don't care about, but I just didn't have anything good to give them. But the meeting on the 17th, definitely let everybody know. I don't know how you feel. I believe somebody from the KCC will be there. So they'll be listening.
Thank you.
I understand you to say the September 26th hearing has been postponed to October 17th,
Yes.
but it's still not confirmed.
That's not confirmed yet, and I hesitate to even say that because it got moved so many times, but that's the current date. And when it does get confirmed, I'll make sure it's in our newsletter, the DAB knows, everybody who's emailed me.
Well, don't rush them. The longer they want to plan for the next 5 years, that's fine. They should take their time.
I'll leave them alone when they tell me all this.
Yeah, maybe they'll forget.
But I appreciate you bringing up that item. I'll give my quick updates. I'll try to be quick. So I mentioned October 17th Evergy meeting. It is September, so again, most of you were at the neighborhood night out. That was a really good time. I've heard about it from other folks, but if we ever see other districts in a van, we did it first. So we passed our budget. Some of the things we talked about earlier were in the budget. So extending library hours at Angelo and Walters. Again, we just have to hire staff, but we did vote to do that. That's something we've talked about for a number of years. In the budget that we passed, there's funding for enhancement to police body cameras, trying to get to the point where if an officer pulls his or her gun, taser, or hits their lights, the body camera comes on automatically. So we're getting to that point. I'm happy about that. That's something I think we need. EMT certification for all fire recruits, 53 million for upkeep of city facilities. One of the things we've continued to hear about is deferred maintenance. So trying to get ahead of that. 145 million for street maintenance over the next 10 years. On a quick note, 13th and Woodlawn is not done. I still get emails about that, but that's the second phase of it. The third phase will happen here in a month or so when it gets resurfaced. So it'll be nice and black with straight lines, all of that. And then next year, a protective overlay will get put on there that will extend the life 7 years. So 13th and Woodlawn's not done. Also, there was some chatter on social media about the condition of Grove between Redbud Trail and 9th Street. That's not done either. Those were just the first repairs. It will be resurfaced as well early next year. Cultural facility improvements, Cowtown, Mid-America All India Museum, City Arts and Century 2, and a property tax relief for seniors program that will give the extra 25% if you qualify for the state program, which there's an age and income requirement. But if you qualify for that, you get 75% tax rebate. The city of Wichita will kick in the other 25%. So you can live here property tax free if you fit the requirements for that program. We don't have that worked out yet. The process is still being built, but hopefully we'll have that soon. We've been getting calls about it. So those things happen. We also forgot where it was. We are looking at there we go, relocation of sanitary sewer interceptor under 135. Decades ago, engineers thought it was cool to build a highway over a sanitary sewer line. And when you need to replace it or get to it, that doesn't work. So we'll be relocating that. I forget the number of millions on that project, but it's mostly in District 3. We renamed the city park along McLean to Millwood Park. It was temporarily called Poem Park. And I think those are the main highlights from there. We had a council workshop. Want to encourage all of you to watch that workshop and stay in tune to all the notifications. Our workshop was about the housing quality that we've been talking about here for a while. I made a number of recommendations that hopefully we can get through. In the code right now is not terms, but just the word sanitary. So I asked to add black mold, insect infestations, feral animal infestations, excessive animal fecal material. I asked for all of those because I've seen all of those. It wasn't just stuff I made up, seen it. A lot of those pictures are on social media, but most of it's not. I do not post the majority of the visits that I go on because folks are worried about retaliation. That was also a part of the workshop. Topeka just passed a retaliatory landlord ordinance. When it came to us at the workshop, we found out it is against state statute. There's no enforcement. So we're looking at trying to create a process for municipal enforcement that will punish landlords who retaliate on tenants who complain. There's one right now that now I'm up to 21 people complaining about. And when they talk about not having AC in the summer, heat in the winter, things not being fixed, this landlord has just been kicking them out and keeping their property. So this landlord will be example number one if we can get this passed of somebody getting justice. Also talked about inspection and inspecting those. A lot of the issues that we run into along the retaliation is when a resident notifies us of an issue. So if you are in apartment 201 and either I go confront property management or one of our inspectors goes and talks about unit 201, they know legally somebody in 201 let them in, that's the person that gets evicted. So I asked for the ability for our inspectors to be able to look at adjacent units without permission. So you can't blame people in 202 or 301 above because we would have that right to go in and check. Only in cases where there's something like a serious issue like black mold that can go into multiple units. So we could go see. And to the extreme of that, if there's 25 or 30% of a building, so like an apartment building that has that, I asked for our ability to remove occupancy, which would mean that the property manager or landlord would have to pay to get folks out into safe places while they fix their property, and we would not give them occupancy back until it's fixed. Also, looked at more assistance for tenants in eviction court. Right now, landlords hold all the power. You'll hear some landlords tell you that they don't. But true power is being able to tell you when you can and cannot go to court. And right now, if you have to go to court on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock and you also need to be at work and you ask for continuance, the landlord can say no and you have to show up or else they win. So looking for more assistance at eviction court, that's more county. Those are conversations that many of me and my colleagues on the council need to have with the county commission. Hopefully we'll start that soon. Also looking at protections for tenants being evicted for having their personal documents, again, against state statute to keep some of that, but there's no enforcement. Right now, there's a landlord who has evicted folks. Just found this out a couple of weeks ago here at Atwater that there was a person who had a housing voucher to go somewhere else, but because they couldn't get their social security card and birth certificate, they lost it. And that's because the landlord changed the locks and wouldn't let them get their property. So I would like to do something about that. I also suggested licensing rental properties. State law does not allow you to license and inspect, but if we license them, we could keep track of who's doing what, make that information transparent for the public. So if you are looking for a place to stay and you see that person who's in the media, so I'll say his name, Lou McGinnis or Eucalyptus Properties, who's responsible for 1/4 of the evictions in the state. They also have terrible properties as well. If you were to see that, you could go choose somebody else. I feel like that's transparent and fair. And that was what I suggested as well as lobbying the state legislature to do more to protect Kansans from out-of-state landlords. Using the Emory Gardens example, I think it was Kate or KSN, it was Kate who went through, I think 8 or 9 hours, 7 different companies in multiple states to find a property owner. That's not fair to the tenants. That's not fair to the city. If we want to hold someone accountable, I think 2 of those companies had dissolved at some point. So I'm going to lobby the state to see if they'll do something to protect Kansans. Hopefully they will. But that was our workshop. the end of August, the 22nd, the day we passed the budget. Definitely check that out. We had a lot of good conversation.
You put something in that said, if they were out-of-state owners, they had to have local management.
Yeah, that was the license piece that I suggested. I would love to see that.
That
Legally,
needs to be there.
legally, the state will probably have to do it, but whatever we can try to do, I want to do that.
Small question for, and like the retaliatory landlord ordinance,
Mhm.
is that an issue, would that be an issue where the landlord pays the tenant or repays the tenant, or would that be a fine? that the city would issue?
So right now, we're working that out. It's a tough spot to be in. So eviction happens really quickly, and this likely will not. And so my preference is that the tenant get the penalty. But it might end up right now looking like they just have to pay a fine and the city get that, and that may be something we use to help cover the rest of this. We're still working that piece out, and that's why it hasn't come. That'll be the first thing that comes to council, because that ordinance we basically took from Topeka, and was just gonna work out the process. Preference is that the tenant gets it, but by the time that all happens, they could potentially be in some other space, or if they end up getting evicted. There's just so many hurdles for tenants right now. I called a few rental properties for a couple people that were in need. And I learned that now they look at your credit score to rent in an apartment, which I thought was crazy. There's also a requirement for most of the places I've called that you make 3 to 4 times the amount of rent per month. There was some other arbitrary thing that they did that it's just a real hurdle on top of some of these places not taking housing vouchers. So it's tough out there if you get caught up in this, or you're trying to get back on your feet and you have folks that just won't give you an opportunity. Other than that, just to repeat again, this Saturday is going to be amazing down at the Chester I. Lewis Reflection Park. Tasha and I went up there earlier for the walkthrough. I cannot put into words what it was like to see the art panels in there, and that was just half of them. It was just the tops, the bottoms aren't in. But having the family of Chester Lewis there while we were walking around, and I could just see the smiles on their faces. So I know Saturday is going to be great. Probably need a lot of tissue. You get a lot of folks in some tears, but it's a beautiful thing happening down there. And if I'm allowed to share a lot of that story from kind of how that came together, I will. But it's a beautiful story of how all of that even came to be really quickly. And then seeing the life and contributions of Chester Lewis. And one of the things that the family had mentioned early on, with as amazing as the sit-in, the Dockham sit-in was, that was just a piece of Chester Lewis's life. And that park really shows you that it was just a piece. There's so much more to all that he did for women in manufacturing, for busing, for justice in general. Like you'll see all of that. Segregating pools, it's a big deal. I've tried to avoid it for the most part so I could see it all done, but today Asha told me it was still on and it was raining, so we showed up, and even in the rain, we got to see how great it was. So again, that's this coming Saturday, and our next District 1 breakfast, October 7th, we'll have Wichita Transit. So that'll be a good discussion. I'll start laying out what the survey is going to look like going forward to improve our transit system, how we'll engage community. We want to engage as many people as possible and as many communities as possible to make sure that we build a transit system that is equitable and serves everyone. There are a lot of issues we already know about. Some of our bus stops are just poles in the ground somewhere. We've talked about that a lot. We haven't made any investments because we want to wait until the study's done. But we've talked about putting more benches in and concrete pads and shelters in places. And we'll probably do that once we figure out what that looks like. Last plug on transit, we're still down drivers. You don't need a CDL. We'll train you on the job. So if we could get 15 drivers, we could start towards my goal of second shift, because we'll need another 14 at that point. So anybody who wants to drive a bus, we'll show you how to drive a bus. We'll hire you.
It was
Start
pretty
going.
terrific that they made the buses available during the heavy part of the heat wave
No,
to a lot of people. I was proud to be a Wichita.
yeah, it was good. So as I wrap up my updates, tomorrow is short-term rentals on the agenda. If you have a thought, feeling on what that looks like, how it can impact your neighborhoods, tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, should be a lively discussion.
And what are these short, is this like B and B?
Airbnb.
Yeah.
It started from the murder in Crown Heights, but the issue was actually that was being used as a party house, which I still see on social media sometimes. It's against Airbnb's rules, but somehow it continues to happen. And then as we dug into it, every short-term rental in the city at the moment that operates less than 7 days is operating illegally. And so we weren't trying to get rid of that business model, but wanted to try to find a way to have a balance of that in neighborhood. The main thing I really wanted to see is not in this, and I don't know how much support it has, and that is to limit the amount of short-term rentals in the neighborhood. If you have a neighborhood like many of ours, it's really nice, it's quiet, people want to put an Airbnb in there, it's great to have one, and you go in there and you've got all these neighbors, but if you end up with 10 and it's just a short-term rental neighborhood, it's not that good. That protection is not in there. And I don't know that it will be tomorrow. So if you have thoughts and opinions, feel free to show up at council. You'll get 5 minutes to speak when the agenda item comes up. You can share your thoughts and opinions. You can also email every council member, as I probably agree with you already. Go ahead and talk to all of my colleagues and let us know how you feel about that. You can continue to let us know even after whatever happens tomorrow, but that is up on the agenda tomorrow. So with that, that is all of my updates. Is there any other questions for me or comments?
I'm like, I know I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm really concerned about this library thing. It sounds like it's gonna be another year before what I want to see could possibly be in place, you know?
It probably won't be a year. We just need to get folks hired. The challenge is going to be that their job truly with neighborhood engagement, and we have to get to all the houses in Matlock Heights, Northeast Bel Air, this neighborhood. Let people know that the hours have changed because people are just used to it closing at 6 o'clock. And even when she brought up the Google Lab, that Google Lab was there, but it wasn't talked about enough for people to know. Also changing the programming, because that's a part of the library master plan. So they will have to really get out here, and I've always said I'll help, but we'll have to do that. We'll have to engage organizations, somehow engage
But
schools.
that's the thing. Some of these people I'm talking to, they'll be willing to do some of this.
But you have to be a paid staff to be
Yeah.
able to keep that building open. Doesn't matter if you have 50 volunteers.
It's such an investment. You've got the infrastructure there. You've got the books, you've got the building. And
Well, slow progress.
it's not available to the
So-
kids.
So we pushed, initially when I got elected, I pushed for more hours. That didn't happen. And finally, I said, love the brick building. We need a mural. We gotta do something to show people there's a library here. Some of the area is transient. So the mural, as she said, is bringing in more people. There's more stuff I wanted to do. And then ultimately, I'd love to see it expanded. Another reason it doesn't get a lot of use is that meeting room is too small and it should be bigger. It was okay when it was built, but right now, if we wanted to do DAB in there and we had 40 people, we couldn't fit them in there. You can only get like 20 in there, so. There's a lot of work there. We continue to talk about more overall, since I've only got 2.5 years left. I would love to see Patrol North move either across the street or down the street and the library expanded into that whole footprint. That's my overall goal. Will we get there? I don't know, but that's what I would love to see. And I think when you get that type of center there that has more space for programming, more ability to get people in there, it changes.
So some of us that have little projects we do, would it support the activity there if we made arrangements to meet there?
Yeah. it was support the revenue there. There's also an outdoor patio, so one of our current library board appointees, Tadana Neal, did like it's an outdoor, I'll say party, but there was reading, there was food, there was free books, and they did that a couple times during the summer a few years ago. So all of that type of stuff helps that. to
That'll
activate.
build that.
Yeah, the big thing is just letting people know it's there and that it's open, because honestly, even past the neighborhood, if you knock doors right now, people would say, oh, it closes at 6, I never go. And we gotta get them to the point where they know it'll be open until 8. She didn't say a time, we're trying to get 8 or 8:30.
I was thinking if it was open from 10 till 8, that would be useful to the people that I talk to, you know?
So when we had the morning hours that she talked about, there were people who liked it, but most of the complaint was that it wasn't open in the evening. So we started pushing there.
Because that's your working people. And that's the parents of little kids.
Yeah, so Jamie's really helping with that, but yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question about structure roots.
Tex only gets to ask a question if he brings chili.
Man, if people show up, there's gonna be none left, and I want people to show up, so I can't promise it. I was looking through the updated policy. I did not see I saw that the enforcement will be funded through the licenses, which are at, I believe, around like in the 200s a year. What was the decision on enforcement? Is it, I know originally there was discussion of misdemeanor up to $500 per day and a suspension of license for 30 days. Where did that fall?
I have to go back and look. We went through a lot of iterations of that. And
Right.
also we were supposed to be working with short-term rental companies on that too, because they were supposed to take someone's ability to have a short-term rental too.
Right. I feel like that's a part of the discussion with this vote tomorrow. That's why I just wasn't sure what was the final policy. So.
Yeah, I can bring that up tomorrow. Well, if there is nothing else, make sure that you bring snacks for next month.
Yeah.
With 6 zoning cases. This may or may not be a midnight run.
If I bring chili, everyone's gonna be taking naps.
Take turns. Now,
All right, well, with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
motion.
Second.
Everybody seems unanimous. See y'all next month.